Hi everyone, and welcome back to BBC. I'm continuing with the theme that was at the monastic gathering where a number of the Abbey monastic community attended a few weeks ago. It was called How to Develop and Sustain Bodhi Resolve, or I've been putting bodhicitta in there, with joy in challenging times. And there's a lot to think about, and I've been trying to see what that means for me and how I can use that beautiful, very expansive theme in my own practice. And I've been seeing it that in my mind, challenging times I can look at it to see the challenging times within my own small world, and then there's the challenging times that confront us all as a global family. And that my general sense to begin with is that speaking with a lot of people that I have been connecting with and meeting over the past year or so, is that there's a lot going on for people in their lives, spiritually, economically, personally, and that they're really asking for tools on how to deal with the unpredictable, the unknown, the challenging things that arise in their lives in a different way than the way that they have been. And then, so that's been my very kind of one-on-one experience. And then on top of that, there's also the concern about what's going on in the world, the war, the poverty, the famine, the inequity on a lot of different fronts, and people trying to work with their minds around that. So instead of falling into this personal distress and hopelessness, they want to find some tools to be able to manage their own minds so that they can be of benefit rather than sort of falling into these ditches of anger or depression or sadness about things. And so what I ended up doing is taking some transcriptions of a retreat that Venerable led here 5 years ago called Activism with Altruism. And I'm on the end of the second teaching that she gave, and finding that it somehow juxtapositions quite nicely with this theme of how to sustain bodhicitta in these difficult times with joy. And so I wanted to continue to share some of her very powerful teachings, very powerful insights and guidance on this. So last time I spoke about our motivation, which is how Venerable started off the retreat, as she usually does, is why we do what we do. That setting our motivation first time in the morning, before we even get out of bed, may I today, with my body, speech, and mind, not harm any living thing and be of benefit in some small way, however I am able. And it's a very powerful way to sort of, at least from my mind, I'm trying to get it to prepare myself for what's going to unfold, because I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, it can be anything. From the time we get to the breakfast table, check our emails, check our iPhones, check the news, get in our car, get on the bus, go to work. There are so many potentials for moments where things are going to arise that are going to be challenging and difficult. I mean, this is samsara after all, right? This is kind of a guarantee. And with the motivation not to harm and to try and benefit, it gives us a chance to somehow not, as time goes on and with practice, when these difficulties and these unexpected challenges show up, we're not sort of contributing to the difficulty in a reactive sort of way, sort of adding to the fuel of the bad news, so to speak. And that there are a number of, besides just really holding this motivation in our hearts, and I've been trying very hard to sort of remember it over the course of the day, because I'll forget it within 45 minutes, half an hour after practice. So trying to keep remembering, okay, not harming today, trying to be a benefit, just keep it simple. So there are a number of crucial words of advice that Venerable gives in this retreat that can help us to cultivate the wholesome qualities, the strength of mind that can actually help us to do this, to be able to contribute in wholesome, beneficial ways with the world, no matter whether it's the small world or the big world. And she's very clear right from the get-go, right out of the gate, that if we want to be of service, if we want to affect positive change in our small world or the world beyond ourselves, with a motivation and a mind that actually brings peace, brings well-being, is that we really have to work right from the start with our own minds. And the states that we find them in a way that contributes and sort of grows all of our good qualities like compassion and kindness and wisdom. So she's, you know, the big picture, the little picture, it all starts right here. And this whole retreat on the activism with altruism was about how to use these very difficult states of mind that arise when we look out in the world, either our own or the bigger one. And how do we work with these minds of ours? So the first important point she addresses is what we are expecting when we get out of bed in the morning. Perfection, good news, smooth sailing, results of our endeavors that are worthy of, you know, all of the time that we spent. We want praise, we want to get what we want, and we want to definitely avoid what we don't want. Some goal out there that we want to achieve or get to easily, exactly as planned. That's kind of, whether we're doing it consciously or unconsciously, we have really set a goal out there, and how we're going to attain that goal. There are some very specific steps that we have in our minds and how it's going to unfold. And that she says that we've gotten very hooked on these goals and end products, something to show for our efforts at the end of the day. And unfortunately, what we've done is we've lost the joy of the experience of the process and the journey itself. We are so attached to getting out there what it was that we put out there and focusing on that rather than focusing on the experience in here, on the journey to getting that goal or having the day unfold as we had hoped. And where we get into more trouble, not only setting this goal out there and get really hooked into how that's going to look, but then we meet up with reality. I mean, how often do things go the way that we planned? I was thinking just the past, let's see, today's the 8th of November, 9th of November. How many times in the past 9 days, when I woke up out of bed, did the day go the way that I had thought? I don't think I've used any of my fingers or toes yet. Maybe one, maybe one. And it's mostly because we don't have a control over a lot of the factors and the causes and conditions that sort of contribute to our goal being realized. So we might have a few of our own cause and conditions that can contribute to it, but there's so many unknown factors that bring that all to happen that we keep forgetting that. So holding on to how we think our goal or the day is going to go is a recipe for suffering. I'm only going to be happy if it comes down the pike exactly this way. And how likely is that going to happen? Okay, so this is reality meets, like for me, Semke's plans and reality usually have this little bit of a, not a head-on, but it's kind of like a tangle, a little bit of a tangle. And then what happens, because we're so focused on this one way of how the outcome's going to be of our day, is that there may be something that happens in the course of the unexpected turn that could actually be of greater benefit, could be a bigger perspective, could be more creative, could be in the long term more fruitful, but we can't open up to it, to the opportunity, because we're so focused that it's got to go the way that I am seeing it inside my mind. And so we close down on any of these opportunities that come when the challenges arise. And then, so what she's suggesting is to come back to the process. And this is very interesting. She says, come back to the process, which is where the motivation comes in. Our motivation is part of the process. It is not part of the goal. The journey, acting moment by moment, having joy in what we are doing without an attachment to outcome. Motivation is not part of the outcome, it is part of the journey. And if we are attached, and then she has this really very sweet analogy. She says if we're attached to how the day is going to come, exactly the way that we plant it. She says, imagine planting a seed. There's your goal. You put it in the ground. We have already immediately pictured through our very profound, incredible ways that we imagine and use our visualizations that this seed is a full plant. It's got beautiful leaves, it's got these fragrant flowers, and it's going to grow exactly as I want in 2 days. And that we want it so badly that we keep watering it until it becomes soggy. So we put these goals, these sort of aspirations out there, but then we micromanage ourselves and all the people involved. So we're kind of watering and watering and watering. It's getting soggy and soggier and heavier and heavier and heavier. Or we keep digging it up to see how it's doing. So there's a mind that keeps proliferating and negotiating and manipulating and moving it and squeezing it and tweaking it. We're so fixated on the process that there's no joy in the growing of it. Yet, she says, the karma we create moment by moment, day by day, is dependent on the motivation and process we use, not the goal. So the karma that we create is in relationship to how we respond to the way the growing, the process, the journey is going. Not that we get a bush at the end or we get a goal realized. It's the journey. That's where we create the karma. And then what we do is we take this kind of goal orientation into thinking about the world and its challenges. Okay, so we struggle around hooking into these goals and struggling around the unforeseen turns in the road as we go, but then we take that same sort of goal process, goal orientation, and we put it on the world stage. I mean, we want our politicians to be honest, we want peace in the world, we want everybody to be fed, we want equity for all, and we want it right now. And that and what happens is, at least for me, is that I get very, very discouraged because it's not happening the way that I want, and it's certainly not happening in the time frame that I want. And because the worldview right now is so global, and the needs of the world are so great, that if I go in there with wanting to contribute in a certain way and having the effect in my own mind and having it ripple out in some way, is that there's so much that needs attention. After a while, it's like, why bother? There's just too much out there. It's too great. The needs are too many. And my expectation on what I think, how I can contribute, makes it more difficult for me to just enjoy the motivation to wish to benefit and not harm. So we have lost the joy of the journey. So this is how Venerable says to what we do here on the small and in the big way, in our little world and the bigger world. She says is to recognize the challenge, the suffering. So helpful to realize and recognize, yes, there is suffering. There is the unexpected. Our goals are not going to be realized. There are things be out of our control. We see them, we acknowledge them, the suffering in all of its myriad of forms. And she says, say to yourself, we are not the savior of the world. And that we can start in our own small way, the journey of helping in our own small sphere, doing what we can, setting a point out there. It's always wonderful to have an aspiration, to have a goal. But to focus on the process, that's the best part. And in some ways, she says, not to worry too much about reaching the goal, or if our goal changes, or the way in which we get to our goal changes. Let's all come from a wish to not harm, but to benefit ourselves and all we meet, and enjoy the ride with joy. And she finishes this part of the teaching by saying that we can never underestimate the power of the individual. And that to cultivate joy in challenging times is to see that one person can make an incredible effect on the world. And we see this over and over again. It's not just the beautiful effects like people like His Holiness and Desmond Tutu have on the world and their being in the world and how they live the journey and how they engage in their journey. But to see someone like President Assad, one individual wreaking havoc on his country, causing incredible amounts of suffering. Individuals having a lot of power to be able to affect the way the world goes. So although our world is small, the influence of our own behavior, our own action, our own motivation will influence one person at a time, and it ripples out, and to enjoy the journey of sort of tossing the small stones into the pond to see what happens. And that in challenging times we can make a difference with our motivation and enjoying the journey. So that was one of the suggestions. As time goes, I'm looking at the transcriptions, and Venerable is, what she does is she's dealing with the states of mind that get in the way of how to address the challenges and the difficulties of our lives in a beneficial way. So I'll see what else comes up as I continue to read the transcriptions, hopefully to generate and to nourish the bodhicitta with joy in these challenging times.